Hey guys, Woody the Unexceptional Gamer, and this is Feedback Friday, a weekly series where you ask the questions on Twitter and I give the answers. A quick note about the gameplay: you're going to be seeing Battlefield 4. I don't know how long this video will be, I haven't made it yet, but I got a chance to play it out there in E3. So it's on PC and it looks really cool, and there'll be a link in the description if you want to learn more about Battlefield 4. Anyway, let's get started with Feedback Friday. Here we go. Woody, who would win the YouTube Hunger Games? I really like this question. I'll run through some candidates. I like to think that I do better than most. You know, in terms of fitness, I'm doing pretty well for my age. I've got tons of like camping and wilderness experience. I'm proficient with firearms. I've got some things going in my favor, but I don't know that I'd pick me to win the whole thing. You know, they're just other guys involved, like Ronaldinho, for example. Well, I've never seen him. Like, he doesn't show himself. He never vlogs or does anything like that. He's said to be the most fit YouTuber. Sam 5000, he has shown himself and stuff, and he actually quit doing YouTube and left on a full soccer scholarship somewhere in America. He's a European. He goes, he's going to come here to America and kick all our butts in soccer or football, if you want to call it that, European football. So guys like that come to mind. You know, they're really good athletes. You know, I've got some survival skills and stuff like that. But I have to say the obvious answer on this thing is FPS Russia. You know, if you're going to talk about winning the YouTube Hunger Games, FPS Russia is a hunter. He's obviously proficient with firearms. He's fit. He's doing MMA training right now. It just seems like if you want to pick it's lame, right, to pick FPS Russia. Everyone's saying, who do you want on your side in the zombie apocalypse? And everybody picks this guy. But the truth is, he's a good pick, man. So I'm going to say FPS Russia wins the YouTube Gaming Hunger Games. That's what I got going on in my head. Woody, your absolute thoughts on next-gen consoles. You know, this is such a toughie for me, right? One of the problems with being recorded all the time, as I just drive around and pick up capture points here, one of the problems with being recorded all the time is that people assign your thoughts of the moment to being your permanent thoughts, right? Like, if I say, like, you know, I'm not particularly fond of Lady Gaga or something like that, and then a year from now say something positive about her album, they'll be like, Woody, you hypocrite, you said you didn't like Lady Gaga, it turns out you're really a Lady Gaga fan, and you know, you deceived us. And it's like, man, you know, it was never meant to be like that. What am I doing to this tank? It was never meant to be like that, you know. It wasn't a lie. It was just, you know, one day I thought one thing, and then sometime later I thought another thing, and that happens to you. But, you know, maybe you're not recorded every day, and it's not quite the same thing. So, oh, by the way, this game, I should mention, I'm watching it as I do this commentary. It had a bug where you couldn't always get out of the vehicles, so driving it into the lake here was my alternative, which I thought was actually pretty clever. I'm glad it worked out like it did. But back on topic, my absolute thought on consoles, well, I don't know. Like, I saw this interview from Titanfall, the developers of it, and they were talking about how they used the cloud, which is Microsoft's 300,000 servers, to augment the power of the console itself. And I thought, that's pretty neat. They're taking lighting effects and stuff like that and offloading it off the Xbox's processor. So the PS4 is actually slightly better in terms of hardware. It looks like that the Microsoft specs aren't out yet. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later in this video. But it's really interesting to me that while the PS4 might have better hardware, Titanfall guys were able to use the like infrastructure and an ecosystem surrounding the Xbox One to make it even better than the PS4, you know, because all the servers out there and offloading this and that. So yeah, you know, I don't know. I feel like I change my mind every day. When I first heard that the Xbox DRM was dropped, I was all excited and I thought it was the coolest thing. And then when I realized all the things that we lost because of that DRM drop, I was all bummed and I thought it was the lamest thing. So I feel like I change my mind every day. I'm going to buy both and I'm going to have an opinion at some point. But right now, shucks, you know, I feel like I like you guys, probably, you know, I'm changing my mind every day on this thing. And you know, that's just the nature of, you know, console wars in June when these things are dropping probably in November. Woody, what do you think of Whiteboy7thst's Road to a Clean Room? Unless I missed something that he's done real recently, I think he's referring to a series that never got off the ground. So let me explain. Before Whiteboy lived in his, you know, the mansion that he lives in now, he lived on 7th Street, which was like this ghetto house that he was raised in, and it was like messy, like super messy, like episode of Cops messy. And, you know, some people are just sort of naturally wired to clean all the time, and he's not one of them. All right, you know, whatever. And he was like, I'm going to do a series called Road to a Clean Room. And he got about as far as cleaning the whiteboard, and then it ended there. And it just stopped, and that was it. And like, on one hand, it's like, you know, the worst thing ever. And then on the other hand, it's the greatest thing ever. And I've always envied Whiteboy's ability to do those greatest thing ever types of things. And I'll explain. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but I remember Kitty was doing this thing where she asked us to promote a charity. It had something to do with like giving clean water in South America or Africa or something. I forget. And like she gave us some talking points, some things that she wanted us to cover. And, you know, like, I don't know if you've ever memorized lines, but I'm not a natural at it. Like I totally struggled. And, like I did it take after take. And in the end, I nailed it, right? I delivered it. It was like professional. It was exactly what she was asking for. And, you know, it was quote unquote perfect. And then like Whiteboy set up a camera and he was drunk and he was, I want to say he drooled on himself at some point in the video, but I'm not sure about that. And he got all his lines wrong and it was crazy and stuff. And it was the best one by far. Like something about the Whiteboy magic just worked for him. And like, whereas I did like take after take and aspired for perfection and tried to give her just what she wanted, she took mine and lumped it in with like whatever 12 other YouTubers, and it was just one of the like collage that she made there. Whiteboy's was so awesome and standout that he had his own. And he had a video that, like, you know, she decided to set his aside and do it as a separate promotional video because it had a kind of magic to it. And, you know, some of you watching are going to love Whiteboy and some of you watching are going to hate Whiteboy. That happens with everybody on YouTube. But a lot of his success, it feels like he can't do... It feels like even when he does something wrong, it is amazingly right for him. You know? He can mess up his lines and it's magic. He can, you know, not clean his room or do a one video series and it's magic. He can do anything and just sprinkle it with Whiteboy7thst dust and it's a kind of magic. And I've always kind of envied that, but you know, I just do the best with what I have and he does the best with what he has, and that's my thoughts on Whiteboy's Road to a Clean Room. It like it never went anywhere. And it was like in the end, it was just a guy who did like a vlog and cleaned his whiteboard. But you know, here we are, like 2 years later, talking about it because somehow Whiteboy can, you know, sprinkle magic dust to his stuff, and it makes people smile. So those are my thoughts. Can we get a Colin update? Is the diet working? For those of you that didn't see, my wife and I kind of unexpectedly started talking about Colin and his troubles, and you guys have heard me say before, sometimes, you know, he's advancing and everything is amazing and it's cool, and sometimes he's not. And after, I guess we did like an airsoft event and he got sick on the plane and came back and stopped talking, and I'll link the video if I'm smart. Who knows, maybe I'll suck and tell you all about it. But the answer is his talking has gotten back to where it was. Like he's no longer like just being silent or sort of like a selective mute type of deal. But The Tourette stuff is not better. He's totally like he does this thing where, like, imagine yourself knocking on a door, but he does it on like the top of his wrist where your watch would go, and then he'll do it to the other hand and even it out, and he knocks on things almost like an OCD kind of thing. Like, he'll knock on the table, and as he walks through a hallway, he just like has to knock on all sorts of different things. And it's a new challenge that that really just started in the last month or so. And, you know, we haven't beaten it yet. So, you know, we'll keep going until we do. Woody, how's Kyle's gaming channel looking? So, as some of you know, FPS Kyle wanted to make a new gaming channel, and he wants a particular URL, like a YouTube username that's taken, but it's not being actively used, so they're hoping they can assign it to him, and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, it looks like some YouTube staff change happened, and the contacts that Machinima was once using aren't working anymore, and that kind of slowed things down. He's contemplating changing up the you know, like lowering the standards and maybe not getting the exact perfect URL that he was hoping for. So that exists. Anyway, it slowed down because he's just having a hard time getting the channel he wants, and he's thinking about just wanting something a little less restrictive. Or a little easier to get, I should say. The rumor of downclocking the GPU in Xbox One. So the rumor, if you haven't heard, is that if you guys don't know, when you make, you know, memory chips or CPUs or GPUs or whatever, if they come out really, really perfect and you set your standards super high, you can overclock them. You can run them at a higher clock rate. And if they're maybe not the exact perfect thing that they were going for, then they usually still work, just if you just have to slow down the frequency at which they operate. So I think I'm in the middle of a collapsing building here. But anyway, now I'm like swimming from the bottom trying to come up from this building. It was pretty cool when it happened. But back on topic. So the rumor is that the yields on the ES RAM at the clock frequencies that they wanted to have it at are bad. So they need to lower the speed of the GPU to get them to work reliably. But it's totally just a rumor. I haven't seen it on any reliable sites. I don't know what to make of it, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything really. It's just a rumor that hasn't been confirmed by anything. I predict that this far out, that it's just a garbage rumor. You know, that they're, you know, like the yields are low in June. It seems like they have time to sort of fix that. But and you know, it'd be way too early to downclock the thing, especially when it already seems to be slower than what the PS4 offers. You can't get even slower still. So that's where I stand on that. I don't put much faith in it because I just see them. It's too early to place any credibility in that particular rumor. What are your thoughts on competitive COD, and would you ever go pro? So let me answer the go pro first part. The go pro part first. The answer is no. No, I would never go pro. Here's the thing, right? When I play in pub matches, I tend to finish on top of the lobby most of the time. I want to say lately my KD's been around 2-ish, and it's pulled up my overall KD to something less than that. I'm a pretty good player. I'm not the best, but when you play with real pros, and I do sometimes, right? Like, I'll pop in an Optic nade shots lobby and play along with him, or I've played with the whole Optic team before. I've played game battles, and even that can be humbling sometimes. The skill gap between somebody who tends to do well in pubs and a real hardcore competitive gamer is eye-opening. And the skill gap between even like a guy who does well in game battles and a pro is eye-opening yet again. I did an event in New York recently, DigiFest, and like 30 guys came out, and I was better than all of them but one, right? So what, you know, it is what it is. We were like playing Call of Duty again and again. I was sort of taking on all comers, and I beat everybody but one guy. That one guy was better than me. He beat me more than once. What have it happens. But like one of the guys I beat literally thought he's one of the best players in the world. His friend was like, you know, he thinks he's the best player in the world. And he's like, I'm not the best player in the world. Well, maybe one of them. I might be close. And I can see what happens. Like, he probably leads pub after pub after pub and thinks that that's an accurate, like, measurement of, you know, how he would do against better players. And it's not. It's not. You know, if you spend some time at, like, the neighborhood basketball court, the NBA would be a completely different experience for you. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer to the first part. Going pro at COD, dude, those guys are so amazingly good. I have no delusions that I would, you know, be amongst them. The other part, my thoughts on competitive gaming, I like it. I like watching it. Mostly, a big part of it that I get from it is that it makes me a better player. You know, I like watching what they do. I like watching their class loadouts, and sometimes that's good advice on what works in the pub area too. I enjoy competitive COD. There are things of it that I wish were a little different. Like, one thing that comes to mind is I wish the team rosters had more stability. Like, you know, I start liking a player and then that guy's on a different team and stuff like that happens all the time. So I like roster stability. This year they added kill streaks, which I think made competitive COD a lot more interesting than it was in previous years. But yeah, those are my thoughts on being a pro and watching the pros. What games are you most excited for in the next generation? So there's a lot of stuff that burns through my head as I think about this. One thing I find interesting is the Battlefield experience, like Battlefield 3, was way better on PC than console. I think most guys agree with that. And in the next gen, that won't necessarily be true. You know, the console guys will get 60 frames per second, and they'll have an experience that rivals what the PC people have always had. And I wonder, COD's major advantage, you know, 60 frames per second, smooth action. COD did in last gen what their competitors are only able to do on next gen with better hardware. It makes me wonder if people will see Battlefield in a new way. That's one thing. I haven't even played it, but this Garden Warfare 2, it's totally captured my Plants vs. Zombies. Who knows, it might be lame, but it's caught my eye as something that just looks fun to play. But if I were to pick one game, I can't get off this thing. I know you hit E, it just won't let me go. It's like a pre-alpha thing. I'm waiting to die. What was I going to say? Oh, Titanfall. Titanfall. Man, that game to me stole the show at E3. A lot of people are excited about Watch Dogs. For whatever reason, like, it just didn't get me all that excited. I feel like I'm in the minority. Everybody loves Watch Dogs but me. I don't understand. But, you know, whatever. My video, I tell the truth. But Titanfall, the biggest problem with Titanfall is that it's an Xbox exclusive. And, you know, for me, that's fine because I'll get both. But for, like, sharing with you guys, like, I typically shy away from the exclusives or games that aren't popular on every, like, platform, because, you know, there are a lot fewer people who are interested in watching it. You know, if I sat here and uploaded, like, Killzone, for example, I'm sure it's a wonderful game, but, you know, there's tons of people on Xbox who have no interest in watching a game that they can't get. And that's my problem with Titanfall, that it just seems like there'll be a lot of people who, you know, who have no interest in watching a game that they can't play because they're PS4 people. But, you know, if I were to pick, I'd say that that thing looks really interesting to me. Woody, can you have Jenna Marbles on Painkiller already? Lots of laugh, you keep mentioning her. You know, she's a... so I like Jenna Marbles' videos. Of course, I've mentioned her. I'm kind of a fan. I like her stuff, etc. One of the things that we can do for other YouTubers when they're medium-sized, like Boogie's a great example. He has 500,000 subs. That probably seems huge to some guys, but, you know, I think it's generally considered a medium-sized, like, pro YouTuber. And it's like, look, you know, you come on Painkiller already. We can introduce you to maybe 200,000 people in the first week that didn't know you before, and then it just sits out there in long tails and helps you for the rest of your YouTube career. You know, to a guy like Boogie, then that's probably an attractive reason to devote as much time to the show as he did last week. You know, I think he also enjoyed his time, and we love Boogie, and like, everything is awesome. But for someone like Jenna Marbles, 200,000 is not an interesting exposure. You know, she is so huge. She's so next level. I don't know why she should do the show. Maybe I have like a problem with my own level of confidence. I don't know. But like I sit here, like if I wanted to reach out to like George Clooney or something, he'd be like, what is this 2-bit outfit you guys call Painkiller already? And I almost feel that way with Jenna Marbles. Like she's so on top of the world that it wouldn't be a win-win. It would be like a win-nothing. You know, we would get a ton out of her appearance, and she would get very little out of ours, I think. So, I don't know. Maybe we should reach out to her and at least get an answer. Yeah. We've had some big guys. We had Freddie W. on the show at one point. Philly D's expressed an interest in doing it. I love that dude. There are some titans of YouTube, but I already know them. Like Epic Mealtime, I knew those guys already when they came on the show. But Jenna Marbles, I don't know already. And, I'd love to have her on the show, but, I wish there was more that I could offer her so it was a win-win instead of us just like, milking off of her success, which is something that I avoid in the YouTube world. Why did you decide to incorporate your family into YouTube when most people don't? I didn't really decide on that. It just kind of happened. Like, I think early in a gaming channel's life cycle, it's all about the game, and then as time passes, sometimes you start to incorporate more about you in addition to game stuff. And my family is part of me. A lot of people on YouTube don't have families yet, so that's one reason that they don't incorporate it. You're seeing people who have like boyfriends and girlfriends. A lot of times, they become an extension of that person, and you start thinking of them as a couple. They're just, there are some married dudes, obviously, on YouTube, but when you say most people don't, it's like, well, I think a big part of that is most people are like teens or early 20s and don't have a family like mine. So, that's just part of the deal. But to answer the question, dude, I never really made a decision to incorporate them. It just kind of happened because I shared who I am, and who I am is partly the rest of the rest of my rest of my house, my little clan.